Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's about 8 p.m. here in southeastern Connecticut. So many of you I recognize from the comments, but if you're new tonight, my name is Jen Rothman. I'm the director of the Yellow Farmhouse Education Center. We're acting as the host for the conference, and it's been an incredible experience for us to be part of this community. We're a small organization. We're pretty new, actually. I founded the organization about 3 years ago. And this is really, I just can't quite put words to how much fun I'm having this week. So thank you. I wanted to, before we get started tonight, share a couple of housekeeping things, which I will also be sending in an email tonight after this session is over. We do have confirmation on the change time for Jessica Alonso's session on pickles, which unfortunately had to be canceled today. We're going to be rescheduling that for Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll update the website, I'll get it into the Slack, and I'll send it out in the email tonight. Also, as a note, and this was in the Slack today, but Stephen's presentation on Friday, March 5th, which is the one about Japanese alcohol. That one is switched from 9 a.m. to 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All of them are Eastern Standard Time. And we have a addition to our schedule. Austin-based chef Gabe Arales, who is currently on the current season of Top Chef, is going to be doing a presentation at 4:30 p.m. on Saturday, March 6th. And we're really excited for him to join the KojiCon. He's a friend of Yellow Farmhouse and of the farm where we're located. We're located on a farm called Stone Acres Farm. And he's been here and cooked with us before. So I'm thrilled to be able to see him again. Okay, so I think those are all my notes. And I will, like I said, be sending out an email with some of those notes with the discounts that we talked about for KojiCon registrants. The Zoom link will be sent out in the email tonight. And finally, the email that had all of the equipment recommendations that Rich had sent a couple of weeks ago. Many of you probably got it. Some of the new registrants might not have gotten it. So I'm going to resend that as part of the email so that you have some of the equipment recommendations that Rich is going to talk about tonight. So moving on to introducing Rich Shi, who many of you know, but I'm going to introduce him anyways. He's the co-author of Koji Alchemy. He is one of the hosts and the inspiration for this conference for KojiCon. This is really coming from his idea and his creativity. And he is one of the leading culinary explorers of koji and miso in the United States. As a food preservation consultant, he helps chefs to build their larders and leverage fermentation to decrease waste. His blog is Our Cook Quest, and it welcomes cooks of all experience levels to learn, share knowledge, and exchange ideas. And tonight's session, as you all know, is called Equipment and Setups. And so he's going to be reviewing equipment needs, basic setups, and walking through a variety of medium preparations for just about any koji you want to make. So let's welcome Rich.
Hey, everybody. Hi there. So great to see everybody tonight, and thanks for joining us. Well, tonight here, at least.
Yes, exactly. Tonight here.
So
good. Well, I think what I will do is put myself backstage and let you take over, and you just let me know when you're ready for me to start sharing your slides.
Sure. So everybody, this is just an introduction to help you understand a little bit more about making koji and all the equipment required to do it. And I think one of the most important things to understand, and I think we've sort of covered this previously, is that the important thing is that this mold wants to grow, and you don't really have to do a whole lot to it to have it grow. I mean, it's family of molds, you know, the Aspergillus family of molds that John talked about earlier, the Flavus, that's quite prevalent, is something that we find every day all around us. It's, you know, an Aspergillus strain is one of the ones that you'll find on your bread or, you know, on your spoiling food. So to understand that it'll grow in the environment of your refrigerator or just in a plastic bag with a little bit of bread, that's the key to understanding the little bit of sort of touch that you have to put on it to give it a little bit of humidity and a little bit of heat to get you there. So it doesn't take a whole lot. So I usually try to talk about this sort of incubation that we're talking about in the same context as if you would proof some bread. So when we talk about proofing bread, we just put it in a slightly warm area and we cover it up such that it does have a level of humidity. So if you think about it in that context and the way that Jeremy was working to be able to grow koji really well, it's in that same context. But obviously with bread and proofing and natural fermentation in those senses, you only have to do that for a short period of time. Whereas with koji, you have to hold it much longer, on the order of 36 hours at the minimum. And then in some cases, like through to the last part of your 48, you don't necessarily have to do that, necessarily have to add heat, because it'll be the carryover of the mold growing itself. So Jen, if you could go to the slides now, then we can start to walk through the process of what you need to make koji. So we're going through basically all this sort of, I guess, what we would call, I guess, sort of specialized equipment, or equipment you would normally have in your home, as a sort of like Western or European cook. But it's possible, if you're an adventurous cook, you already have these things, and that's the key to it, I think, in terms of what you already have. Just use it to be able to make koji, like Jeremy was talking about. If you have a radiator that's holding at 86F or 30C or somewhere in that range, you don't necessarily need to do anything else, as long as it's staying in that range, and all you have to do is cover up your tray and let it do its thing. So these are sort of the things that you need that will help you be more successful easily, versus having to struggle with trying to hack something together. They're not high tech, but the key thing to remember is that they're also on different levels of expense. So whatever you feel comfortable with and what you can do through your own resources, do that. And then if the cool thing about it is that if you have a setup that works, that doesn't have some of these parts, you can just add them on later. Because if you look at the Book of Miso and how they tell you how to make koji, basically it's just a box that you cover with a heavy towel or a heavy cloth, and you put hot water bottles in it, and you just keep switching the hot water bottles out until your koji is grown. So it can be that simple. But these are some of the things that you spend a little bit of money and you can do a little bit more. So let's go ahead and move. Oh, so here we go. So koji making rules, as I was sort of speaking to, we need to maintain a temperature. So it's not like much hotter than ambient temperature. I mean, we're talking 30C or 86F. So that's not much more than what you are accustomed to in your own homes and what you keep at your own homes. So to be able to bump up the heat a little bit more, it's not a big deal. It doesn't take a lot of energy. The other thing you need to do is maintain humidity. And to some scale, you don't really have to worry about that much. As Jeremy was talking about in his application, all you have to do is cover your koji tray, and the inherent moisture in the substrate itself that basically circulates through when it's covered is enough humidity to create those awesome bricks that Jeremy is able to make. So you don't need a lot of humidity. In terms of setting a particular chamber to a humidity, there's probably the range between 70 to 80% that you would want it to be at. But the incubators that I use fairly often are super high humidity. They're condensing on surface everywhere, but you can manage it through some of the things I'll talk about in the later parts of this presentation. So maintaining humidity is basically a level of humidity that's going to keep the mold happy. And it's a wide range based on what I've just told you and what you'll see and what Jeremy has been able to show you. The third point is you want a microbial blank slate. So basically, you basically want to cook it, or you want to heat it such that on your substrate, basically your bed of grains or whatever it is that you're growing your koji on, that's a starch. you want for it not to have any microbes from the air or naturally, because when you put it in this state, the state that the specific koji wants to grow is other, it's good for other molds, it's good for yeast, it's good for bacteria, all these things that you don't necessarily want to grow at the same time. So what you're doing is you're basically isolating just the strain that you're adding, just the Aspergillus oryzae or whatever koji you're using. So you know that as you grow it, it's safe and it's exactly what you want. So you either have to cook it in the case of preparing grains, you soak them and steam them, or you just cook them in some water, or with your beans, you're cooking in water and steaming. So this is the microbial blank slate. You're cooking it such that it's food safe and that there aren't any microbes. So you start with something that you would say doesn't have any sort of life in it. So you can do it in those ways. And then if you think about also in the context of soy sauce, I think we mentioned it a little bit previously, you have the soybeans that are cooked, and then you're adding toasted cracked wheat. So the toasting and the toasting of the wheat basically gives you your microbial blank slate. And the fourth point is you want an accessible starch. What accessible starch means is that you want the mold to be able to infiltrate it. So because through gelatinization of starches, you're able to create a medium such that the mold will easily infiltrate it and be happy growing. It's an easier way. The easier way to explain it is to tell you what an accessible starch isn't. So an accessible starch, it's not an accessible starch, obviously, if the bran around the grain is still intact, because the mold cannot infiltrate through the cellulose. So what you have to do is actually, through polishing, is what you have with white rice, is that, all the bran is polished off. And then also what you can do is, the other things that Jeremy talked about previously in his presentation was just cook it a lot such that it'll just open up. Or, there are other preparations that I'll talk about later. But basically, you want to be able to get that starch open and free and ready to take on the mold. But the other thing that you need to do is you can't overcook it such that it's so mushy that the mold will not take to it. It'll sour, you'll get really poor growth, and it'll just, maybe if you get some growth, it'll just be on the surface. And the key also, as some of you have known through your practice of making koji, is that you want these air pockets. So when you have these air pockets, basically you're creating this sort of network of starch that has air pockets such that the mold can infiltrate and grow through and interconnect with itself, such that it has all this air. So it's like a ton of surface area when you have these grains that are put together. So you can see that you don't necessarily want it to be too dense or too heavy, because it'll get all squished together and you won't have enough air. And then you don't want it to be sticky, because the wetness, the mold will just not grow on. Next slide, please. So now I'll go through the overview of basic equipment needs. Next slide. So this is just a simple steaming setup. You can get these bamboo steamers, online or at most specialty. I don't know. Probably most kitchen shops have them. So it's got these slats such that you can that the steam will come through, and basically you just set this on a large saucepan or even a frying pan that has this diameter. This is a 12-inch. Recommend this because it's the largest that they offer. You can pick up a pair of these for like $20 to $25 US. And then all you do is you have some simmering water. You just set this over it. And then to add your grains, because they're these slats, all you need to do is just a nice tight woven cloth. It could be a napkin, could be anything that has a way to capture the grains. And then you basically just tuck away your grains, and then you put the cover on and you let it do its thing. So, I mean, many of you might already have these, or you have a version that's metal. The issue with the metal ones that people typically have for their pans, the diameters are quite small, and they're not really set up to handle a lot of grain. So with one of these, I can fit a hotel pan that's fairly sizable. It's on this order in terms of length and width. So, and then when you buy it, it comes in a set with another one on the bottom, so you have 2 tiers, and it's great just to having to steam things in general. So if we could flip back to the slide. So just a simple steaming setup. It's good for grains or soaked legumes. So Jeremy went over his dehydrator method of incubation. So as he's talked about, all you have to do is contain your starch bed, your grain bed, in a pan at about 1 to 1.5 inches high, in terms of that's about 3 to somewhere around 3 to 5 centimeters in height, such that you can keep the grains from growing and generating, from not generating too much heat in terms of the dissipation. So this is sort of a set it and forget it method. So if we're looking at this sort of cross section in the circle, the bottom represents the starch bed. And then as you can see, there's this humidity that is created from the moisture of the starch bed. And that's protected by the plastic layer, whether it be a cover that's perforated or you have some plastic wrap with holes. And then there's a level of air that's allowed to pass in because the koji still needs air to grow. But as you can see, you don't really need a whole lot of air and a whole lot of moisture to contain to be able to grow really nice koji, as Jeremy has demonstrated. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is the basic setup of what I use to be able to grow koji. So it basically is it's basically the setup where you have this. This was introduced to me by Brandon Byers. He has a book called Everyday Fermentation, and I was able to contact him a long time ago, back in 2014, when I first started working with koji. But basically, the way that it works is that you have a water bath in the bottom of the container, and what you do is you just heat that water bath enough such that you can create humidity through the water bath, and also create heat capacity. So the way you do that is very simply, the first thing you need to get is one of these. This is just an aquarium heater. They're fairly inexpensive. I think they're somewhere between $20 and $25. This one it's 100. This one's actually 200 watts, but we recommend 150 watts, and that can handle a reservoir of a fairly large cooler, on the order of the size, maybe 3 feet by like 1.5 feet, such that you can fit a hotel pan into. So hold on. So the heat capacity for being able to fit one of these guys in, which is fairly sizable, this can grow about 4 pounds of koji at one time. So once you have this to heat your water, all you have to do is pull hot water from the tap into the bottom of your reservoir. So if we can head back to the slide. So if you look at the plastic container in front of you, basically you have your water bath, and you have these jars at the bottom. I mean, you can use anything to basically space your trays above the water. So once you do that, that allows the water to evaporate such that you create the humidity. And when you purchase one of these heaters, they're adjustable, and I usually set mine at 86F, which is 30C, and that's what we call the optimum for creating protease. But it doesn't really matter when you're first starting, like that sort of like attitude of going a little bit higher, like on the order of 10 degrees higher, 5C higher. It's not a big deal when you first start making koji. or even in all cases, because I just set it at this temperature and I forget it, and it's not a problem at all. So some of the things that you can do in terms of tweaking your temperature, you can totally do that, but it's not essential to be able to create the sugars that you want from starches or the umami from proteins. So with the heater, you're heating it, but then the other thing is you want a level of being able to create humidity. So the other thing that's part of this is an air stone. So for those of you who are familiar with accelerating for vinegar making, you basically take an air stone to aerate your vinegar to accelerate it such that such that you can create more acetic acid much faster through feeding the acetobacter. So all you have to do is basically take this air stone and put it in that water bath as well. And then the air stone, obviously it's called an air stone because air gets pumped into it, and it basically creates a lot of surface area of air that comes through, and it creates a lot of bubbles. So the purpose of this is to aerate the water to help, to help the beings in the aquarium live. But in this case, you're using it as effervescence, plus you're adding air into your chamber as well. So those two factors to create heat and humidity are the key. And then to run the air stone, you have some tubing that you'll attach to a small air pump. This one is, and you just need something on the order of the smallest. This is 10 gallon, 40 liter. So whatever the smallest air pump you can get. Just if you buy all this stuff together, people who actually take care, like the people who actually pay attention in the pet store, will think that you're going to kill your fish. And then I would advise not having the conversation, just because it just becomes a whole thing when you start talking about exactly what you're trying to do. So anyway, that's just a segue. So if we go back to the slide package. So now you have this water bath that's heated. It's, effervescing, creating humidity. Now you want to be able to put trays of koji inside your chamber. So your chamber is built by, just this plastic bin, right? It's this plastic bin, and then that's all it is. And then all you need to be able to create the water bath and the effervescence and the humidity is that you just need to be able to space your trays above it. So I just use these really small 4-ounce jars. You can use whatever you want, but this is what I decided to use because what's really great about this particular sizing for this hotel container is that I can actually fit those 2 trays that you saw in that picture. So if we're just gonna, the air stone, and so this allows the space for the air stone and your heater, right? And then all you need is your tray that will fit in. So you'll have your substrate in here, and then the cool thing about this is that I bought these, basically these like really small 9x17 cake pans, but they're short. I don't know why Target makes them short, because sometimes you want to like actually bake a taller cake. But anyways, they work really great because what you can do is I also bought this cutting board, which fits exactly like this, such that you can fit 2 tiers here. So I can do a couple pounds of koji in this setup. So as you can see, this is, so one thing that we had talked about is that because this is creating so much humidity, things will start to condense. What's really handy about this also is if you buy these, these Cambro hotel containers, these plastic hotels, which they call in the restaurant terms, is that they come with these covers. And also some of them come with a little slot for an immersion circulator. So this is really handy because, then you have it contained, your humidity, And then if you have it sort of in your home, you don't have to worry necessarily about insulation. But the other thing you can do about that is, just put this, in another container, put a heavy blanket over, those types of things. But this is your incubator. It's super simple. But one thing we talked about is because you'll have, colder, like colder temperature up here and a warmer temperature here, you'll get a lot of condensation. The way you combat that very simply is that you just take, a cotton towel, tightly knit, so you don't get lint on your food, and you just put it right over it. And you typically dampen it just such that it's not dry to begin with. That would actually suck moisture away from your substrate. So this is a super simple way to be able to create an incubator very inexpensively. The cost of all of those parts to be able to put in here, assuming that you have a container like of this size and some trays, is less than $50. And arguably, you may not even need the pump and the air stone, depending on the conditions. You could totally run it without that. And the other thing that to think about is that that's also in. So all these images and these sketches that illustrations that I'm using are from Koji Alchemy. So all of this very specific information is in there and accessible, and you can go back to it at any time. So the other thing you can do, if you already have an immersion circulator, a lot of us have these. This is a Joule. It's a little powerhouse. So all you have to do is use this as your heat and your circulation to create the humidity, and it works great. And obviously, if you have the fancy cover that clears it, then you're good to go. You just have to cover this up a little bit. If you don't, then just use some plastic wrap. I mean, this bin itself, it's a storage bin. I'm sure all of you have a storage bin that you could do this setup in very simply. And all you would need to do is, use immersion circulator you have, or, the other thing is, like I talked about, you could just, exchange hot water, I don't know, every 8 to 10 hours or however long it keeps the temperature. Or this could be another thing that you could just put on your radiator that keeps it nice and warm. So there are all these ways to be able to maintain a slightly warmer temperature, and it's really not that hard to do. And I like the fact that you can use all sorts of things that you already have as people who cook and culinarians. That it's super simple, and that's the key, is like you can do this very simply. And as I said in the book of miso, literally it's a box with some hot water bottles, and then you put your koji in it. So if you can do it on that level, you can do it. You can do it simply in other ways. And these are I like this just because it's like when you're done, all of these things are usable. You don't have a dedicated, I mean, with the exception of the air stone, but you could, arguably use that for accelerating vinegars. But the air stone and the heater are the only things that, are sort of specialized to this. And those are easily stored because they're so small. And then the other key to this setup, right, is that you can use it. You can use a cooler. So what I was talking about in terms of the setup is that it's easily scalable by using a large cooler that will fit the largest pan you have, and then you can do sort of the same types of stacking things to be able to get, say you're trying to run 4 different experiments, you can just stack different trays all over the place. And you can even use it in the same sense of, I mean, some of the things that I've done before is that you can fill the water a little bit higher. You can run it as an incubator to accelerate your amazake while you're also running your koji. So there are tricks like that you're already running this energy that can be utilized for other things. And I think that's the beautiful part about it, is that it's not taking a lot of energy to run, especially if you're using it in a cooler, because the cooler is insulated. And if you think about how long coolers these days can hold things cold, it does it in the same sense when you're trying to hold something slightly warmer. And I think that's really awesome. So if we could hit the slides again, Jen. So that's the basic water bath incubator. You can do it, use it in so many different ways. It's versatile, it's inexpensive, and you can just get up and going very simply. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go a little bit more advanced in terms of, you know, something that is more traditional in the Japanese sense of having an incubator. So this is called a modern muro. A muro is basically a koji incubator. So as you can see, it's just a cabinet that has all the trays in the top, because as we all know, heat rises. So basically you have this area of your cabinet that takes heat and humidity. And then what you need is basically you need a heater to generate the heat and a humidifier. And those are basically very simple personal, you know, basically a personal humidifier and a personal heater, so that if you're sitting at your desk at the office, or, you know, you're doing some things in a small room, these are things to just sort of locally heat you. It's plenty of energy to be able to heat this entire cabinet and create the humidity you need. And the key thing of this construction is that it's made of a lot of them are made of cedar. I think John will talk about the type of wood that he used, but basically the type of wood that's used is very good at being able to stay structurally sound when it is wet. And the other thing, the advantage of being able to run with wood is that one is that the water doesn't condense, it wicks into the wood such that you don't have puddles of water for, you know, any sort of concerns about anything else that may be hanging around. And the other advantage is in the early stages of koji growth, it actually acts as an insulator to maintain your temperature. And then the other piece of it is that as you're growing your koji more and more, you know, the spores actually get infiltrated, and you have this level of an aging effect that has, you know, some, you know, a bit of a microbial generator that's part of your process that continues along as you're creating koji. So very simply, it's the same concept that I've talked about, and this is a more traditional setup with the materials at the time. So at this time, I'd like to call in John Cox, who actually has designed this muro, the one that you see on the right, and he's going to show us what he's doing live. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, everybody. Sup, Koji Con?
Hey.
How's everybody doing?
Everybody's doing great. Yeah, so everybody's been wanting to see your muro and all that, everything that it's about.
Yeah, sure. Let me get rid of, I got all my cookies here. This is the cabinet here. Hey, everybody, I'm John Cox from Quercus Cooperage. We're in upstate New York, outside of New York. We make whiskey barrels and tanks, fermenting tanks. So you may know me from Instagram and my Kyokis, which we can talk maybe about a little bit later. Been making Kojiban and trays for about a year and a half, and people have been asking me to make this Muro cabinet, and this is what I designed here. Let's see how it's doing. Let's see what we got going on in there. We got our humidifier going and the heater unit here, and then up top here we have the trays. I have a really standard humidifier here. It's used in the reptilian incubation world. It comes in through this hose here, and I have this small ceramic heater. As Rich was saying, you don't really need much heat, especially once everything kind of sparks off there. This is all regulated by an Inkberg regulator. I have the manual here. The kit comes with the regulator. You plug your heater and your humidifier into it, and you can call up what temperature and what humidity you want in there. As Rich said before, this is white cedar. This is white American cedar. Cedar has a great chemical makeup that makes it rot resistant and holds up to moisture. That's why we see cedar shingles and cedar roof shingles. Your house won't rot and fall apart. So cedar has a great makeup for that. These are two of the trays here. We have two of our koji trays here. The wood's great because it absorbs a lot of the excess moisture, making sure things don't get too soggy. And we have 2 trays here. I do custom sizes for people. I'm making one with 4 trays right now and another with 3 trays. And I sell this kit. I'm introducing it tonight here at KojiCon. I'll tell you Kojanarians. And we're pretty excited about it. This door flips up here and closes. I put this cool design on the front. We like that. That's our spore right there. And if you guys have any questions too, you can reach out to me on Instagram or through Jen or Rich, and I can talk to you about it more. And but this is our Mura cabinet right here. It's 24 inch by 24 inch, and it's about 12 inches deep. And like I said, it comes with the regulator I have here. I don't know if you can see on the screen, but you can see the plugs go into there, and it gives you a digital readout of what your temperature is and what your humidity is. It comes with these probes, so you can put this probe right into your tray, and it'll measure the heat and humidity right there on the spores itself. Yeah, that's about it. Rich, I don't know if you want to come back in and we can talk a little bit more about it. Let's get some of this steam going in here, the humidifier. Yeah, so that's our Mura cabinet. We're pretty excited about it. Can you hear me, Rich? I think Rich is muted. Maybe I'm muted.
How much can you
There you
grow
are,
in each
Rich.
tray?
What's that?
How much can you grow in each tray?
1 kilogram in each tray.
Okay, that's pretty good.
And like I do custom sizes. I think the interior of this one is pretty much 9 by about 21 by about 3 deep inches, that is. But like I said, I can make custom for people. But yeah, Chef Barry Tonkinson at the Institute of Culinary Education down in Battery Park City in New York. He got my first one and ran it a bunch of times. He loves it, and he gave us a little testimonial we have on the website. He was getting 2 kilograms each time he ran it.
Okay. Someone was asking what if they wanted to build one, what types of woods could they use?
They can use white cedar. It's really the best. Like I said, it's mold resistant. The woods that the American consumer has access to, let's say in the Lowe's or Home Depot, you get cedar. There's really only plywood or pine. Pine's going to introduce a lot of resins and maybe start to affect the flavor profile, where the cedar is really neutral. We also use fir in our Kyokis here. Fir is really good, not like a 2x4. This is called clear fir. And this is another neutral wood that's not going to impart a lot of tannins or resins or other unwanted flavor profiles.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's great. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, really excited about it. We sold a few.
I believe Jeremy bought one, right?
Jeremy has one. Yeah, it arrived safely over the weekend, and he's going to be sparking that up soon. And you and him and my friend Bob Florence and like I said, Barry were great. You guys let me bounce ideas off you about what works and what doesn't. We added some openings in the back, so it wasn't so airtight. I had it very tight, but it was too much, so we needed the air to breathe. Yeah, so I'm happy with how it came out. We know it works.
Yeah, and we have a question from Tad. What's the cost and the lead time?
The lead time is about 5 weeks. The cost is $675. That comes with all the mechanicals. I do offer it for $550 without the mechanicals. And if you're watching tonight, you get a 10% discount as a KojiCon ticket holder. So order now, and I'm going to keep that sale going throughout KojiCon. And people can reach out to me either through PayPal, or you can go to my website and order. We have it up on the website. And I'm offering 10% off all of our products, our Kyokis and all our different sizes, and our Kojiban trays. And I can talk more about that later at the end about the other things that we sell.
Yeah, we're gonna show some folks some koji that's grown in your trays from
Cool. Great. Yeah, we got a lot of Kojanarians out there. Shout out to all my fans out there, Quercus. We love you guys. You guys give me tons of support, and it really means a lot. You guys have embraced me over there at Quercus, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we love your work, and we love what you're doing.
Guys, yeah, I'm so glad I could be a part of it.
Awesome. All right, so we'll catch you back at the end.
See you guys later.
So that was those are all the basic incubation options. I mean, if we're talking about larger scale things, obviously you can build an entire room that does this stuff. One of the larger scale things that you can do immediately through culinary channels is just to buy a proofing oven. Those work fairly perfect for this application, as I talked to you about in terms of proofing bread over a short period of time. If you've got a proofing oven, you can just hold it longer, and it's that simple. And you can make, on the order of, well over 50 pounds in a run, depending on the size. You could even run, maybe closer to 100 and those types of things. And obviously, we can also mention the speed rack setup, or, if you have an old refrigerator, that you can also put these components in. So the components of the Cedar Muro, like all that stuff is portable into another application. So of the speed rack stuff, because Noma does that a lot when they go off-site to be able to grow some koji, is that you just get the plastic sleeves that zipper up, and then you just stick the heater and humidity underneath, and you're good to go. So that's a way to be able to sort of scale up pretty quickly without a whole lot of tech to be able to make a lot of koji. Yeah, let's flip back to the slides. So that's the Muro. Now we'll head into grain and starch bed preparation. Next slide. So what I have here is a schematic, the anatomy of a grain of rice. So the key behind this is that we were talking about, obviously most of the things that you'll get, unless you get plants, rice plants, you're going to get the hulls that are already removed. So all you'll see is the bran. So if you get wheat berries or rye berries, you're very familiar with bran that's intact on a grain. So the key to it, in terms of being able to create a accessible starch, like I said before, is that you have to get past the bran. So you had to expose your gelatinized grains. So, in terms of the way that you're able to do it so simply with white rice is because the grain has been polished such that all the bran's been removed. So it no longer has that barrier. And what you need to do in a very simple sense of the traditional way of doing things is that you would soak your rice and then you would steam it. So you soak it, at least 6 hours to be able to hydrate it. And then what you'll do is steam it on the order of, 45 to 60 minutes, depending on the type of grain and how thick it is, of that nature. So once you have that happen, we like to describe it as, when you sort of consume it, it's al dente. So it's like to the teeth as you would make pasta. But when the Japanese describe it, it's that the outside is hard, and the inside is soft. And I forget the terminology for it, but you sort of get the picture that it's this sort of structural grain that's not sticky and wet, that's going to hold structure as you build your grain bed. So the other alternative to having gelatinized grains, obviously, because we've been working with a lot of other substrates, is that you have cooked substrates with available starch. So what that means is basically when you're talking simply about, making a soy sauce that has high protein, a high protein legume, and you supplement it with toasted cracked wheat, then you have these cooked substrates that have available starch, because when you're cracking the wheat, it basically is broken apart such that the starch is available. What it also does is it sort of meters the moisture content such that you don't get these wet and sticky areas and nothing's too dry. So it's kind of an interesting marriage in terms of once you pull out the cooked legumes and you've strained them and you add it back into the toasted cracked wheat and you start mixing it, basically the steaming action and the excess moisture hydrates all of the toasted cracked wheat such that you have this matrix that I talked about where there's these pockets of air and there's accessible starch. So it's like basically a bunch of broken up pieces that are like easy food for the mold to grow on, and then it'll help it be able to grow on around and infiltrate the soybean as much as possible through this sort of kickstart with a starch. And then, so those are the three concepts in terms of creating this accessible starch. It's like exposed gelatinized grains, you have cooked substrates with starch. So you have sort of like an either or both at the same time construct of the first two bullets. And then you have the grain substrate bed with air pockets. Next slide, please. So these are sort of the examples that we've provided in Koji Alchemy that really spoke to us in terms of how to understand growing a substrate. So obviously, the first one that we always talk about is, using jasmine rice, a long grain rice. The reason why we talk about this is because Koji really likes amylose. But the other part of it is that the structure of the grain is such that it's thin and long, such that Koji can infiltrate it much faster and get accessible, more surface area to access. And it also creates this really awesome network. So in the black and white illustration, you can see a cross section of what the rice looks like and the matrix of air in between. And then to the next to it in the colored picture is how much it's actually grown at the end of the cycle. So you can see between creating that matrix and growing it, you have the mycelial network that goes in between the grains and creates that nice brick that you get, such that you have all this enzyme production to be able to create the lovely things in post. The other things that we've talked about are soy sauce. So we talked about how soy sauce has these large beans or the large legumes that have this network that networks in between the broken cracked grains and the starch that has excess, such that it feeds the Koji and it allows it to like kickstart and create this really awesome matrix as well. And you can see that in the colored picture as finished from our book. So the other thing that the other things that we've done is, if you have grains with bran on them, what we've done is we've soaked them, we steamed them, and then we've broken them up by running them through a food processor, or if you have it's more effective sometimes if you use a high-speed blade application like a blender or these NutriBullets that you can use to be able to break up the grains. So what you're doing is you're creating a structure such that these grains can be broken up, because in a lot of times, if you're trying to break up the grains ahead of the cooking process, they'll get wet and mushy. So by doing the steaming process, you're able to break up the bran and be able to create these open pockets such that you can get good growth. And the example right next to it on the left bottom corner is nixtamalized corn that we broke up in that fashion to be able to create a really nice matrix. So nixtamalized corn actually is a really wonderful product to be able to grow Koji on, and the aromatics on it are wonderful. And then there's this sort of other context of being able to create a gelatinized starch. One of the things that I played around with very early on when I understood that Koji really liked gelatinized starch was I just popped some popcorn, because that's what happens when you heat the starch inside the kernel. You basically gelatinize it and you cause it to explode through the pressure. So you have so much accessible starch there. It's ridiculous. And all you have to do to be able to create a medium to be able to grow Koji on is wet it a little bit. So these are sort of the context to be able to help you understand how to make Koji, because all you have to do is create these conditions where you have, accessible starch, air pockets, you have your humidity and heat, and you're good to go with any context. And I know like a lot of people, have been using bread. And what is that? It's a gelatinized starch with lots of air pockets and structure. And mostly used when it's stale. So it's a perfect application for that. And for people who've grown it on it, that you can see how wonderful it grows. Next slide, please. So these are the Koji trays that we talked about. And this is basically how it looks once you have put your grains into it. And had a little bit of going about it. So as Jeremy talked about earlier, all you have to do is put your substrate into the tray and sprinkle a little bit of koji starter on it, dispersed spores, and mix it around. It's the same process as you would for rice to be able to get the spores dispersed throughout the medium such that it'll grow very well. Next slide, please. So one thing is that if you are going through a more traditional process and you want to be able to run a little bit more koji, or you have a larger setup, you have to consider that the grain bed is going to heat up. So the way that you combat that is that the koji heating actually starts to come into play about 20 hours in. So that's why when we talk about doing this level of mixing, you start at the 24-hour mark. So all you would do is after you have not inoculated your bed and have run it for 24 hours, you would come in and mix it such that you would aerate it, and you would also cool it back down to room temperature before you put it back in to keep the heat going. And one thing that you would do is you would create these furrows, these rows. And what these rows do is they create more surface area such that the koji will cool itself through that surface area. And then a lot of times what you'll have to do is just do it every 12 hours. And that's not a whole lot of work. You just, sort of time it such that, it's not during a ridiculous hour in the night. Most times you can just sort of like let it go a little bit longer. But one thing that you have to understand is that if the koji does get too high in heat, it will sporulate and go off. And the activity may even stop altogether just because it has basically killed itself. And one thing that I want to note is that's really awesome about a book that I love in terms of learning is the book of miso, right? It has this chart. It has this chart in it that tells you the heating cycle of koji and when you should mix it. I highly recommend getting this book, not just for this chart, but for everything that's in it, because it's amazing. And as you can see, those are the steps of the very simple incubator I was talking about earlier with the hot water bottles. So this is a great book. It's basically the encyclopedia of how to do things with miso and koji. It's amazing. It's out of print, but it's wonderful. And I think that pretty much concludes what I was going to talk about in terms of prepping your starch substrates to be able to create any koji you want, as well as incubation options. And at this point, we're going to open it up for questions, and we'll bring John back at some point too. Oh, there he is.
I'm back.
I'm going to bring him in now because I think there were some questions about that setup. So I think I'm just going to start from the bottom and kind of start going up.
Okay.
So here we go. After the koji is set into cakes, what's the protocol for cleaning the cedar koji on, or do you just go to the next cycle using it as a base sourdough-ish?
Yeah, I mean, I in terms of maintaining them, you just sort of scrape them down and get as much off as possible. And then you just let them dry. I guess the thing is try to get as much off as possible and keep them dry.
Great. And then there's a question about charcuterie, but I think that's going to be covered both in Jeremy's session about vegetable charcuterie and then probably in Misty and Meredith's session, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
That would for sure be more appropriate.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. If you see a question that you want to answer, otherwise I'm going to scroll back up and see what I find.
Yeah, I see one that says, does sporulation affect flavor? Yes, it does in more short-term applications. But in the longer-term ones, if you're holding your miso or shoyu for upwards of a year, you're not really going to taste those nuances. The other thing to think about is that if you go to that level, you just end up waiting longer. I mean, Douchi is a Chinese application that actually calls for a ton of sporulation that you rinse off. So if you're doing like an all legume application and you didn't intend to have all that sporulation, you can rinse it off and make a dochi as Jeremy had recommended earlier, whether you salt it or you do the brining method.
Great. And then there's a question for John about the extent of flavor impact from the white cedar on the final koji product.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Rich could speak more about that. I picked the cedar just because it's a traditional wood that's used, and like we talked about the raw.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of a nuanced flavor that would only hold to like short-term applications, just because, you know, once you start doing all these other processes, you know, those aromatics go away. But I'm sure like if you used it immediately for you know, some sort of amazake, I'm sure like there's definitely some flavor there from that.
But the wood also does create a biome in there that's individual to what you've been doing in there. Like you said, it can spark quicker the more
Right.
you use it. So you are creating a personal biome in there that's going to give you some flavor.
So here's a question about any tactile descriptions for when your rice is done. Jesse mentions Kirsten's book mentioning that you should be able to pass your thumbnail through.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing to look for is that you don't have a starchy white core when it's finished. I mean, it's just sort of like a feel thing once you figure it out. But I think, you know, tasting it has been the most consistent thing for me in terms of figuring it out.
Great. And then here's a question about the gyokis. Are they exclusively for shoyu?
Oh
No,
no,
you can-
we have
You
people
can put
using.
miso in them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can put miso in
them.
them. Yeah, I mean, you could do whatever you want. Hot sauce.
Yeah, we have people doing hot sauce, like char the insides for some of the hot sauce people. Mead people
Yeah.
love it.
Pickles.
Yeah, your
you
sauerkrauts, your kimchi.
I mean, you can do whatever you want in a gyoki. I mean, anything that you do in a ceramic, you could do in a gyoki.
And our distilling clients use 800-gallon versions of these, and they ferment their beer in there before distillation. That's what our gyokis are based on. They're a smaller version.
Rich, I think there was a clarification on the rinse method, how to spell it, and I can put it up in a banner if you spell it for me.
So it's Douchi. That's the romanization. But I mean, yeah, I mean, all you need to do is just rinse it such that you'll see all the spores sort of float on top of the water, and just try to get as much as possible.
You want some? We don't pass that dochi down the left-hand side when you're done with it. Also.
And then there was a question about cooking rice and that it comes out too dry when they tried steam, and when it cooked normally it's too wet. So how do you get it just right?
So you might want to soak it a little bit longer to assure infiltration of enough water. I feel like it also like is driven by the rice, but I've soaked rice as long as like days just to see what I mean. I think I've had rice soaking for like a week before I made koji. It went really sour, but try to get as much infiltration of water ahead of your steaming, because the steaming, like once you have a well hydrated grain, I mean, the steaming can take as short as like 20 to 25 minutes. So I think it's probably that you haven't soaked it long enough, and also try to choose, you know, a long or medium grain in opposed to a short grain.
Great. And there's a question about the koji cakes, what to do with them. I'm imagining that's going to be covered in the applications that are coming up. Is that right?
Yeah, that's basically your starter for making, you know, any application you want, from the shio-koji, amazake, sake, you know, obviously ultimately becomes vinegar, and also all the umami stuff, whether it be soy sauce or miso. So yeah, we're going to cover the applications of the koji once you have it.
Yeah.
But that's your enzyme engine for all this stuff.
Yeah, I relate to this question very much, because I feel like I'm ready to kind of start thinking about the applications and then maybe back into this piece of it. But so
yeah,
I
I mean, it's interesting in terms of the context of how to present this to people. And what we usually do is, Well, sometimes we'll do it backwards. We'll have people work with the actual Savory applications and then say, hey, well, this is how it's made. You can do it either way, and I think it's just a matter of getting the whole picture and then you understand it.
Yes, and as I know we've mentioned a bunch of times, but all of these presentations are obviously recorded, and the links that you have, you can watch at any time and you can come back to it. So if this isn't the right order for you and you come in at the application, then you want to go back to the setup and the equipment, all of these will be available to you until the end of May. Frank was asking how many gallons is the one you're showing, and I'm not sure which one.
This is 2 gallons.
Okay.
It's 2 gallons here, but we do 2, 3 gallon, 4 gallon. Standard ones we do 15, 60, any size really.
Oh, John, did you want to mention the Koji tray kits you have for anybody?
Oh, yeah. So thanks. Yeah. So we do trays a little bit bigger than this, and we do a kit. You get 2 trays. You get some muslin and some light Koji spore for Gem from Gem Cultures, California. We use Gem. We like them. And I also do the kit along with Rich and Jeremy's book. You can go to my website. That's right, Koji Alchemy, Volume 1. There it is right there. Local bookstores have it. And yeah, it's great. So we sell, you get 2 trays, you get the muslin, you get the spores, and you get the book. It's a great starter kit. It's a great gift. We do engravings on the side of it. If it's a restaurant, we put their logo on it and stuff like that. And all different size cubes. We actually started doing half gallons. We sell them with a follow-through lid or a whole lid. Yeah, so half gallon all the way up to 5 gallon has really been the culinary stuff that we've been putting out there. So you can reach out to me, and we're happy to do custom stuff. And we can do them in cedar. We do some of them in cedar. We did some cheese girls for David Asher. He's making some cheese and some of our oak ones. And we also do them out of cedar. So we can
awesome.
Do them for you.
Yeah, everybody should check out John's website just to see what he has to offer. And he's always happy to take on a neat project for anybody who wants to investigate something in wood.
We did a 7-foot by 3-foot Koji table for Bob Florence out there, who I know is part of it.
Yeah, that was in my presentation with all the rows. That's Bob's.
Yeah, maybe we'll see that when Bob presents. I know he's taking us on tour for his presentation. So I think there's like one more question I want to put up here, which is just, can you use the trays with the sous vide setup?
Yeah, you just need a large enough incubator. So I think one of the things John is willing to do is do custom trays, as long as you're willing to work with him on pricing.
Oh, I do it custom all the time. It's like $5 more. There's that one bread proofer that everybody has that makes trays for that. Yeah, it's just about changing. Yeah, it's fine. We can do any size you want.
Great. Well, I think we are at the end of our time, and the questions have slowed. As always, post questions in the Slack channel. And I know, John, are you on there now in the Slack, or can we get you on there?
No, I was in the Slack. I was looking at the YouTube and the comments, but I'll go check out the Slack.
Okay, I'll get you invited to that. And
then you can be a slacker.
Yeah, we'll start slacking.
Yeah, you gotta start slacking, exactly.
Don't slack on the Slack.
Oh boy, it's late. We gotta go. Thanks everybody. It was so good to see you. That was really super interesting, as always, Rich. And thank you, John. It was so nice to see you again.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Good luck with the rest of the show.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good night.